What is up, guys? I am Neil Barrett, and today we're taking a look at some of y'all's thoughts on the current PLL season. Each team has now officially played 3 games, even though we're headed into week 3. It's one of those weird things about the schedule and the way that it shakes out. So we have a pretty good idea of who these teams actually are now, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to give you guys a chance to voice your thoughts and opinions, and I'll react to them. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first one comes from Jay Rodriguez, who writes, 1. Atlas needed that loss. 2. Chaos need to find their groove, really think that week 1 roster was it. 3. Bundy needs more touches. 4. Woods needs Simmons or to move their attack line around roster-wise. 5. Whips are scary, but I don't think they're going to play in the championship. That's a lot. Let's take it point by point. 1. Atlas needed that loss. I don't know that anyone really thinks they need a loss. That notion's kind of funny, but I do understand that you learn about yourself in a loss. You can find weaknesses and stuff. And to that point, I think it's not the worst thing in the world, especially when there's still plenty of time. If this was week 10, I could see that being an issue. Like you want to go into the playoffs kind of hot and going. So I don't know if they needed that loss, but again, you do learn things from losses, and the fact that it's happened now is better than it happening later. So I guess I can kind of agree with that. Number 2, Chaos need to find their groove, really think that week 1 roster was it. So the thing about this one for me was I don't feel like there's been a big, huge change. There's 2 areas where they kind of made some changes. The first one was dropping CJ Costabile to move Will Bowen up to the LSM and bringing in Jack Posey in close defense. I think that is probably a net negative move. You know, having Will Bowen and CJ Costabile on the field seems like the better option for your defense, but they did hold the Water Dogs to 10 goals this weekend, and you would think that holding the Water Dogs to 10 goals would be a winnable game. So I don't know that I hate that move, though I would probably not make that move. The other area where they made some changes was tweaking the offense a little bit. They dropped Sergio Perkovic and Ty Kurtz and brought in Braden Maia and Eric Dobson. This was, as Coach Towers put it, an effort to get younger and faster and stronger. Again, I'm not totally sure that I would have made those decisions. I don't know that you really gained or lost anything. That being said, Eric Dobson did kind of fill Sergio Perkovic's role, and while I do really like Braden Maia, I don't know that he had any more or less impact than Ty Kurtz normally does. So it kind of feels like a 1-to-1, you know, it didn't really change their game very much. That being said, it's hard to argue against offensive output, and with the aforementioned guys, they were averaging about 13 goals a game, and with the new guys, they have 13 goals in 2 games. So I guess you could make that claim that they should shift back more to that week 1 style roster and see how that works. Number 3, Bundy needs more touches. I can see kind of where your head is at. Obviously, he's playing very well. You would think getting him the ball more would help that offense, but I think it's kind of one of those things where he's getting those good looks because of how, not infrequent, but in a manner of speaking, how infrequently he's getting the ball. I mean, obviously he's getting the ball a lot, so it's not that infrequent, but he's kind of the Will Manny of this offense, where he benefits by being that guy who's sliding or you know, fading and moving into positions based on where the Dodger is, and then he gets open looks, and he's been killing them. When you say Bundy needs more touches, to me, and this may not have been exactly how you meant it, but to me, that's saying that he should have the ball in his stick and be creating more, not he should be on the backside receiving. It's kind of like saying Mac O'Keefe needs the ball more. Yes, you want to be getting Mac O'Keefe the ball more, but by saying Mac O'Keefe needs the ball more, there's an implication that he's going to be the initiator rather than he's the guy playing off ball, catching and shooting, which is what I think Bundy is doing, and doing very, very well. So again, yeah, Bundy needs more touches, but they need to be specifically curated to the way that he's being used in this offense. Number 4, Woods needs Simmons or to move that attack line around. I'm not even going to lie to you. I had to look up who you meant by Simmons because I didn't even realize that the Woods had Alex Simmons on their roster. I was so confused when you just threw out Simmons. I was like, wait, what? But yes, absolutely. The NLL Rookie of the Year should probably be getting a look on this Woods roster. He should probably be getting that look anyway, but especially when they're 0-3 and they're this inept on that offensive end, you would think a guy like Alex Simmons could come in and get you goals and get other guys activated in your offense. And I can only assume that there's some kind of passport issue or visa issue, because why he wouldn't be on the field for this Woods team, I don't know. And I do hope that we get to see him at some point. Assuming that there is some kind of visa passport issue keeping Simmons off the field, though, what else can they do? I don't really know. This team kind of beggars belief. You look at that roster and you think they should be great. The only thing that I can really think of is maybe putting Chris Gray down on attack for Westberg. I get why you're running Chris Gray out of the box, because you're trying to get Chris Gray and Westberg on the field at the same time, and you're not running Westberg out of the box. His game is not suited for that, and Chris Gray, at least in theory, has a game that's much more suited to that. But I just kind of feel like pairing RP3 with Chris Gray might actually be a real key to this Woods offense. Chris Gray's a little bit more mobile than Westberg, who's a great player. I'm not in any way trying to knock Chris Gray, just talking about comparing their games. We talked about Will Manny just a minute ago, and I think that Chris Gray can again be that Will Manny kind of guy for Rob Pennell, who's still plenty capable of creating his own shot, but can really thrive letting RP3 dodge from X and finding his spots to get very quick shots off. So I think that's kind of one move, and maybe even the only move that I can really see, short of making some moves outside of their team, trading some guys, which I'm not even going to get into those scenarios. We'll be here all day. But in terms of what they already have on their roster, that's one change I think that you could make that would make a pretty instant impact. I don't really know what you do with Westberg, because like I said, you're not going to run him out of the box, and he's probably too good of a player to just drop. So maybe the knock-on effect of that is that what you actually do is move Chris Gray into Ryder spot and run Ryder out of the box. I don't know how that affects the offense, but maybe there's some solution there. The other thing beyond their attack line is maybe trying to figure out how to get more production out of that midfield line. The midfielders all have some decent stats, but when you watch the games, you feel like they're not really in the games at all. I'm not entirely sure what the answer is with that midfield, but you certainly look at that roster and feel like that midfield unit is worse than the sum of its parts, and it should be better. Part of that is getting the right guys on the field at the right time. When you're hunting twos like they were this weekend and Romar sitting on your bench coming out of a timeout is baffling. The one super two-bomb threat, I know you got other guys that are capable, but he is like that two-bomb threat for you, and he's sitting on the bench when you need a couple of big-time scores is just baffling to me. And 5, whips are scary, but I don't think they're going to play in a championship. I don't know how scared of them I am. I mean, don't get me wrong. Jim Stagnita is probably the best coach in the PLL. I don't even think there's really much of an argument there. And I never want to count out a Jim Stagnita team. And the improvement from week 1 to week 4 in this roster is just insane to watch. So again, I don't want to count them out, but I would tend to agree that this does not feel like a championship team. We'll see in another 4 weeks, we may be saying something totally different, but right now it feels like they're going to get better, but they're probably not quite gonna be that championship team. They'll probably make the playoffs, and maybe even I could see them maybe knocking someone out that we're not expecting, sort of like they did this past week with the Atlas. But yeah, I'd say at least, again, right now, and I'm reserving the right to change my mind in a couple of weeks, but right now I would not say that they are really a championship caliber team. The first one is from Dog Griff, who says, Paul is taking too much from the NBA and encouraging refs to ignore basic rules that help keep O and D running smooth. Basic stuff like warding, playing defense with both hands on the stick, holding, and crease calls just aren't happening. First of all, I just want to say there's entirely too many conspiracy theories going on with the PLL and Paul Rabel being this little puppet master who's doing all this for his own enjoyment and his own self-gratification. It's getting really out of hand these days. I mean, I guess that's kind of the world that we live in, where everyone thinks that if it doesn't go their way, there was some conspiracy against them. But this is really getting a bit ridiculous that Paul is this giant puppet master. So want to say that first, but also it feels a little weird to say this given that, you know, we saw holding and crease calls happening this weekend. There are always going to be calls here and there missed. I know people had a lot of issue with the Levi Anderson swim move and what was probably a ward, at least by definition. But one, it wasn't the most egregious warding call we've ever seen. I can easily see how a ref missed that. And two, I don't think it really changed the play. To me, it's that Michael Jordan Game 6 1998 finals, did he push or not? He could easily have just had his hand on the dude's back to pull the swim move and not actually done any real push with it. I'm not saying he did or he didn't. I'm just saying that, like, it's a call, it gets missed. Crease calls are a little bit different of a story because what usually ends up happening is that the crease call doesn't affect the play and would actually slow down the pace of play, because what usually ends up happening in missed crease calls is a guy with the ball running at the goal takes a shot, it is saved, or the defense immediately picks it up, and then he goes into the crease. And the refs do swallow the whistle in that situation because it has no impact on the play. And by blowing the whistle and stopping play, you're actually depriving the defense the opportunity to create a fast break opportunity. So it's not really worth the blowing of the whistle. We did see plenty of holding calls over the past couple of weeks. I can't really think of too many that have been very egregious, because at the same time that you're saying you want holding calls called, defensemen are saying these are not holding calls. So there's a give and a take here, and I think overall the reffing is pretty good. There have been some notable misses, but there are going to be calls that are missed, and the best they can do is try and get them right. As for playing defense with both hands on the stick, we're talking about a league where you can play defense without a stick. This is not the NCAA or high school or whatever where your stick breaks or you drop it or whatever and you have to pick it up. You can play defense without a stick. So there isn't really a rule about playing with both hands on the stick, because if that was the case, then how would you play defense with no stick? Next up, CT95 Design says, has the table officiating been rough or is it just me? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by table officiating. I can only assume that you mean when they go to the table and do like a review, for which I would say I think they've pretty much gotten everything correct that has been reviewed, barring perhaps a few things where there was a scuffle and maybe this guy deserved a little bit more time or a little bit less time, but that's a judgment call. I'm not going to be too mad about that. The only other thing that I could think that you're talking about is like the clock management guys. And yes, that has been bad. It has been bad for years. It seems to be especially worse this year. I don't know why. In theory, it should be improving every year. So I don't know what's happening there, but we've all seen it. We're all frustrated by it. Even the announcers at times are calling it out. So I don't know what the solution there is, but hopefully I would like to think that the PLL is, if nothing else, online enough to understand that's a frustration and are hopefully trying to make that better. Whether that happens or not, we'll see. My friend Fossey Hala says, talk women's lax with Foss. Foss, I would love to do that. Obviously, we're a little bit in a little bit of an off season. I know we got some U.S. women's team stuff that we could be talking about, but I would love to have you on and talk women's lacrosse. I need someone to educate me on it, and that is one of my goals with this channel, is to get more into women's lacrosse and box lacrosse as well. So hopefully we can work something out. Let me know. We'll figure it out. Next up is my friend Hershey Laxdice, who says, at 0-3, the Woods should tank for Cursed and go scorched earth on the coaching staff this offseason. And they're a bad 0-3, not like the Dogs losing 3-1 each time. Woods need a new direction. At 0-3, I don't know that I'm ready to throw the towel in on the Woods just yet. It was just 2 seasons ago that the Water Dogs started 0-3 and ran through the rest of the season and won the championship. The margins in the PLL are razor thin, and little tweaks and stuff can just ignite your offense, can shut down your defense, and teams are very capable of kind of going on a hot streak and winning things. So again, I'm not ready to throw the towel in on the Woods just yet, especially when all it really takes is to make the playoffs. And with 6 of 8 teams doing it, you can be pretty bad record wise and still get in. And once you're in, that's all it takes. I'm a big European soccer guy, and what we often do in soccer is break down this very long season into much smaller pockets of 5, 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it is, of kind of, we're going to take this pocket of time and we're going to make some changes, and we're going to see what happens with the team at the end of, again, 5, 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it is. We're going to kind of reassess, reevaluate, and see the next stretch of 5, 6, 7, 8 games, see what we can do. At 0-3, we kind of have an idea of what this Woods team is and what some of its issues are. I think coming into week 5 in Boston this week, I might tweak a few things and then kind of look at the next 3 games, see if we can't improve, see if we can't get something to grab a hold of. At that point, we'll be 6 games into the season and should have 2 very good ideas of what this team is or can be. And maybe I would tweak 1 or 2 things, give it another week or 2, and then ultimately, when we're coming down to the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, I would probably evaluate where I think we are and what our realistic chances are of winning. And then maybe I would start thinking about next season, but I'm not ready to do it at 0-3. Additionally, side note, I'm not so sure that as good as Kirst is, and he is very good, I'm not so sure that he's worth tanking your season, especially at 0-3. If we were coming into this past draft, maybe. But even then, again, the margins in the PLL are so razor thin that every team feels like they're in it, and they're right. They're always 1-2 moves away from being that championship contender. We've seen it so many times where a team, yo-yos up and down because of one move here, one move there. So there's not really much of a point in tanking, at least not in the traditional sense. Another thing to remember is that there are as many draft picks in the NFL draft's single round as there are in the entire PLL draft. So the need for tanking isn't as great because you're only shifting a few positions here and there. There are always guys out there, even if you don't have the number 1 or 2 pick, that can completely change the path of your franchise. Even going undrafted, every year we see an undrafted rookie step in and just blow everyone away. So I'm not sure that the need for tanking, at least in the current form of the PLL, is really even all that necessary. The last one from Instagram comes from HPerner97. Hopefully I said that. I don't know if it's HP Earner or what. And he said the Whips can still run it. We talked about this earlier. I am never going to count out a Jim Stagnita team. Again, I think he's probably the best coach in PLL history, and the changes already that have been made from week 1 to week 4 are staggering, and I think this team can be very competitive. But again, I'm not ready to label them championship contenders just yet. If they continue to progress in another couple of weeks, I will probably be changing my tune, but right this moment at the end of week 4, I don't think they're quite there. One, I want to see them be a little bit more consistent. I want to see the performance from this past week carry over to next week, to the week after that, and see what they can build. And 2, I still have some questions about them on the defensive end. They did a very good job frustrating that Atlas offense, but also Atlas just didn't shoot well. There were several times when they got to their spots, they got the shots they wanted, and they just missed the cage. So again, I want to see that Whips defense step up and play at a slightly higher level, and then and then we might be onto something. But they definitely have some very good pieces, and if I was a Whips fan, I would be excited about their future, even if that future is not this season. Next season, the year after, stuff like that, they look like they are building a good core that is ultimately going to replace that Rambo, Zed, Burn lore, maybe even Joe Nardella. They're already kind of building in that next wave. And so again, if I was a Whips fan, I would be excited about my future outside of just this year. Back on Twitter, the last one comes from Jackson Van Vlake, who said, "Everyone is too good for teams to go undefeated. Water Dogs and Whips are figuring it out. Woods might go winless. Archers have serious problems on their offense. The top two picks are as advertised. Their teams are number one in their conference, and the whole class in general is awesome." That is a lot. You did not organize it. So let's try and parse this out and talk about it. Everyone is too good for teams to go undefeated. Generally, I think that is probably true. Again, I've said it plenty of times in this video. The margins in the PLL are crazy thin, and you can look at the Denver Outlaws for that example. That defense looked horrible last year, and this year has been arguably the best in the league without really changing anyone. They've just kind of tweaked some things, and they have gotten astronomically better. That being said, I don't think that we're super far off from seeing somebody go undefeated. Like, I think it will happen. It's not going to happen often. It's not going to happen this year, obviously, but I think that the idea that someone could go undefeated is not crazy. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. Water Dogs and Whips are figuring it out. The Whips are 100% figuring it out. The Water Dogs, I am still kind of holding out a little bit for. Dan Artesia, I hope I said that correctly. I may not. I've never actually had to say it out loud. It's always just been on my screen. But Dan wrote a great article last week about how the Water Dogs' issues were not the face-off guy, and it was really about how their offense and defense were performing. And I saw a lot of those issues still present in this game. They just happened to be playing a Chaos team that wasn't capable of putting up more than 6 points. But again, like I said about the Chaos earlier, they held the Water Dogs to 10 goals. That's the lowest Water Dog output this entire season. So it's not like things just magically got better and they got a win. They've played pretty much the same way. They just happen to be playing a team that could not put goals on cage. So again, I agree with you that the Whips are figuring it out. They are getting better, but I am not sure that the Water Dogs have done anything to improve, which in a weird way kind of makes them scarier, because I feel like they're playing at a pretty decent level. If they can kind of make those one or two changes, they're gonna be a very dangerous team. The Archers have a serious problem on their offense. I know you're an Archers fan. I was in the fan club with you for a long time. I'm still figuring it out right now, but I don't know that I agree that the Archers have a lot of problems with their offense. I would say that it is not as efficient as it has been, for sure, but I think they were really rolling and playing very well until they moved Ament down to the attack line, and it felt like that kind of discombobulated everybody, and no one could quite figure out where to be or what spots, and it really did kind of affect things. The one thing I would say that I think this Archers team is missing is a real two threat. I know Mac O'Keefe can be that guy. Obviously Schreiber's probably capable of it, but we just haven't seen them really shooting twos at anywhere near a high enough level. And that was really the difference maker with the Cannons was twos. Both the Cannons offense and the Archers offense hit 9 goals. The difference was that 5 of the 9 goals that the Cannons hit were 2-pointers. So it's a 9-9 game that was very quickly out of hand because of 2s over 1s. I know that you know that I am not the biggest Chris Bates fan, and I do think that Bates is going to Bates, and it does feel a bit like this season Bates has Batesed this team into a little bit of a rough patch. I think they can figure it out. I still would have them as a championship contender because of that roster more or less being the same, or arguably maybe even a little better, again, at least on paper. Obviously, the games are not played on paper, but I think they have all the tools necessary to win a championship. I also don't think that Dobson had his best game. So if I'm looking at last week, and I'm not going back farther than that, but if I'm looking at last week, I'm seeing that the Cannons hit 5 2-pointers and Brett Dobson had a bad game. And if that's what it takes to beat the Archers, I will take the Archers in pretty much every game, because I'm not banking on one, much less both of those things happening at the same time. The top 2 picks are as advertised. Their teams are number 1 in the conference, and the whole class in general is awesome. I 100% agree. The entire class has been incredible. Again, like we talked about earlier, TJ Malone was picked up in the 3rd round. He's been one of the steals of the draft. Tyler Carpenter is another one that has been just an absolute incredible player in this league and was drafted much lower than perhaps in retrospect he should have been. But yes, absolutely, the top 2 picks are great. There are some people online saying that O'Neal has only been great for 1 quarter. I would argue that this past week he did so much by pulling himself out that freed up Graham Bundy Jr., that freed up Zawada, that freed up a lot of the other guys on his offense to get looks they might not normally have gotten when the Woods defense was insanely aggressive. Every time Brennan O'Neal had the ball and he dodged, he was getting slid to both adjacent and off the crease. So he's getting 3 guys coming at him. I will say the one downside in Brennan O'Neal's game this past week was his inability to get the pass off. He often saw the guy that was open, typically right around the crease, but couldn't get the pass to him. I think the Woods flagged like 4 of his passes to the crease, but all that to say, they've been great. I don't think that there's any debate that they are as advertised, and this class is good.
They are who we thought they were.
And is living up to the greatest draft moniker that was given to them by the PLL. And I am really looking forward to this draft class over the next 10 or 15 years. So what did you guys think about what I thought, about what you guys thought? Let me know in the comments section below. This is a video series that I'll probably do every once in a while throughout the season. Every couple of weeks we'll break down you guys' thoughts and opinions. But that's all I got for you this week, but I'll be back next week with more. So until then, see ya.